I came home early to surprise my wife and found out I was the fool in my own marriage. I have never been a suspicious person. If there was one thing I prided myself on, it was my ability to trust the people I loved. And Sarah, my wife, was the person I trusted most in this world. We had been together for 8 years, married for 6. Sarah was kind, thoughtful, and always knew how to make me feel loved, even in the hardest moments of life. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I never had a reason to doubt her love for me. And then there was Emma. Emma wasn't just Sarah's best friend. She was a part of our family. I had known her since Sarah and I first started dating. They had been inseparable since college. Emma was there for every major milestone in our lives. She was the maid of honor at our wedding, the first person at the hospital when Sarah had her appendix removed, and a frequent guest at every family gathering. If someone had looked at our relationship from the outside, they might have said that Sarah and Emma were too close. But I never saw it that way. In fact, I was glad that Sarah had a friend she could confide in, someone who understood her in ways that maybe I never could. I even considered Emma a friend myself. I used to joke that she was our second wife because she was always around for so many key moments in our lives. For years, nothing seemed out of place. There was no distance between Sarah and me, no obvious lies, no sudden changes in behavior that would make me question her loyalty. But sometimes, betrayal doesn't come with warning signs. Sometimes it's just there, lurking in plain sight, so well hidden that you never even think to look for it. I lived in that false sense of security for too long. I thought we were a real family, that nothing could break the trust I had in them. I was wrong. So wrong. It was just another normal day. I left work earlier than usual. I had planned to surprise Sarah with a home-cooked dinner, a small gesture to make her happy. Lately, she had been busier than usual, spending more time with Emma or staying late at work. I figured a quiet night together would be good for both of us. I stopped by a wine shop and picked out a bottle she liked. I also swung by her favorite bakery and got her favorite dessert. While driving home, I smiled to myself, picturing the look on her face when she walked in to find the table set, candles lit, and dinner waiting. I had no idea that the moment I stepped through our front door, my entire world would collapse. When I walked in, the house was unusually quiet. I assumed Sarah hadn't come home yet. But then, from the direction of our bedroom, I heard soft laughter. I froze. Not because the sound itself was strange. Sarah often laughed like that when talking to Emma. But there was something different in the way she laughed this time. It was softer, more intimate. I set the bag of groceries down on the kitchen counter and slowly made my way toward the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. I don't know why I pushed the door open. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the gut feeling I had ignored for too long. Maybe it was my own foolish trust that led me straight into the most painful moment of my life. The door swung open, and my entire body went cold. Lying tangled together in our bed, in our sheets, were Sarah and Emma. Their clothes were scattered across the floor. Their bodies pressed against each other in a way I had never imagined before. Their lips were inches apart, still carrying the faint trace of a smile, until they saw me standing there. For a second, none of us moved. Sarah's face drained of all color, her mouth opening as if to say something, but no words came out. Emma sat frozen, her eyes wide with shock. The only sound in the room was my own heartbeat, pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. Then Sarah finally spoke, her voice trembling, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. "Mike, why are you home so early?" That question nearly made me laugh. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I should scream, demand an explanation, or turn around and walk out. All I knew was that in that single moment, everything I had ever believed in had just shattered into pieces. I don't remember how long I stood there. 5 seconds? 30? A full minute? Time lost all meaning as my brain struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. Sarah, my wife, lay in bed, half naked, tangled in sheets that still smelled like us, but now carried the scent of someone else. Emma, her best friend, my friend, was beside her, equally frozen, looking at me with the wide-eyed expression of someone who had just realized they had destroyed something irreparable. And the worst part, neither of them said a damn thing. No explanations, No apologies, just silence, thick and suffocating. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Sarah finally moved first. She pulled the sheets up, covering herself as if that would somehow erase what I had already seen. Her lips parted, but all that came out was, "Mike, I can explain." Explain? I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. A hollow, bitter laugh bubbled up in my chest. "Explain what, Sarah?" I asked, my own voice unrecognizable, hoarse, unsteady, somewhere between rage and disbelief. That you and Emma were just having a deep conversation? That you tripped and fell into each other's arms? Emma flinched. Sarah reached out as if she wanted to touch me, but I stepped back before she could. "It's not what you think," she started, and I cut her off immediately. "Don't." I didn't need to hear whatever pathetic excuse she was about to offer. There was nothing left to explain. The truth was in front of me, raw and undeniable. I looked at Emma, waiting for her to say something, anything, but she just sat there, gripping the sheets so tightly her knuckles turned white. The same woman who had once given a speech at our wedding about how lucky Sarah was to have me. The same woman who had always teased me about being too serious, but had been there for us through everything. She had betrayed me, too. This wasn't just Sarah's betrayal, it was Emma's too. I felt something crack deep inside me. Not anger, not hatred, something worse. A hollow, consuming emptiness. I don't remember making the conscious decision to leave. My body just moved on autopilot. I turned, walked out. Sarah called after me. I heard the sheets rustling, hurried footsteps, but I didn't stop. I reached the front door, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it didn't do anything to numb the feeling inside me. I got into my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. And then I just sat there, staring at the empty road ahead. I could go anywhere, drive to a friend's house, find a hotel, go to a bar and drown everything in whiskey. But instead I just sat there, completely and utterly lost. I don't know how long I stayed there. My mind kept looping back to the same thoughts. How long had this been going on? Had I been blind this whole time? Was it me? Did I push her to this? Was I not enough? I didn't want to think these things. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hate her. That would have been easier. But I couldn't. All I felt was this crushing sense of loss, like I had just watched the last 8 years of my life crumble into dust. The home we built together, a lie. The future we planned, meaningless. The person I loved, someone I no longer knew. And the worst part, she wasn't even sorry. If I hadn't walked in on them, would she have ever told me? Or would she have kept lying, pretending to love me while sneaking off with Emma behind my back? I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel even tighter. This was real. This was happening. And no matter how much I wanted to rewind time, I couldn't. At some point my phone buzzed. I didn't look at it. I already knew who it was. Sarah, maybe Emma too. I couldn't face them. Not yet. Because the truth was I had no idea what to do next. Should I go back and demand answers? Should I pack my things and leave? Should I fight for my marriage, even after everything I just saw? I didn't know. All I knew was that the life I had before today was gone. And I wasn't sure if I could ever put the pieces back together again. I wanted to believe that this was something new, that Sarah had only recently started feeling this way. That maybe somehow, this wasn't a long-standing betrayal, just a terrible, impulsive mistake. But the more I thought about it, the more cracks I started seeing in my own memories. The nights she stayed out late, saying she was with Emma. The way she had slowly pulled away from me over the last few months. The inside jokes between them that I never quite understood. Had it always been there, right in front of me? Had I been a fool this entire time? I thought back to the nights I spent alone while Sarah was working late or having a girls' night. I had never questioned it. I had trusted her. I trusted her. And that trust had been turned into a joke I wasn't in on. I gripped the steering wheel until my fingers ached. Was this why she had never wanted kids? We had talked about starting a family for years, but Sarah always pushed it off. Said she wanted to focus on her career first, that she wasn't ready. I had been patient, understanding. But now I couldn't help but wonder, had she known deep down that she wasn't planning to stay with me? Had Emma always been the person she truly wanted? Had I just been a placeholder? The thought made my stomach turn. I finally checked my phone. 10 missed calls. 15 unread messages. Most from Sarah. A few from Emma. I didn't open any of them. I couldn't. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over the names of friends and family, wondering if I should tell someone, if I even could tell someone. But what would I even say? Hey, so my wife has been sleeping with her best friend for God knows how long, and I just walked in on them. It sounded ridiculous, embarrassing. I couldn't bring myself to make that call, not yet. Instead, I drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't go home. At some point, I ended up at a small motel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place with flickering neon lights and a lobby that smelled like cigarette smoke. I checked in without thinking, barely hearing the receptionist as I handed over my credit card. The room was cheap, plain, just a bed, a desk, and a window that overlooked an empty parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. The truth was, I had never pictured my life without Sarah. Even in our worst arguments, even in the moments when I was frustrated or tired, I had never once thought about leaving. She was my person, my best friend, at least I thought she was, and now I wasn't sure who she was at all. I thought about going back, not to forgive her, not to pretend everything was fine, but to understand, to look her in the eye and ask why, how long, was any of it real? But a part of me was terrified of the answers. What if she said it had been years? What if she said she had never really loved me? What if she looked at me with pity and told me I had always been the last to know? I wasn't ready to hear those things. Not yet. Maybe not ever. At some point, exhaustion took over. I lay down on that cheap motel bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything sink in. Sarah wasn't coming to save this. Neither was Emma. This wasn't some misunderstanding that could be talked through. This wasn't something I could fix. And for the first time, I let myself accept the truth. The marriage I thought I had, the life I had built with Sarah, it was already gone. And I had to figure out how to let it go. I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The cheap motel room was dark, the curtains drawn shut, the air stale. For a brief blissful second I forgot where I was. But then reality crashed back down, crushing and heavy. Sarah? Emma. The betrayal. It wasn't a dream. It was my life now. I checked my phone out of habit. More missed calls, more messages. I still couldn't bring myself to read them. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. I had two options. I could let this drag on, let Sarah plead, let her try to explain, let her manipulate me into believing this was somehow fixable, or I could end it, walk away. Not with anger, not with revenge, just leave. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want closure from her. I didn't need an explanation. No answer she gave would change what I had seen. No excuse would make it hurt less. So I made my choice. I was going to let her go. But on my terms. I texted Sarah, "We need to talk, just us." She replied instantly, "Come home, please." I didn't respond. I didn't want to go back to our home. It wasn't mine anymore. Instead, I asked her to meet me at a cafe we used to go to when we first started dating. A quiet place, away from the memories we had built together. When I arrived, she was already there. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, fingers twisting nervously around the coffee cup in front of her. For the first time in years, I didn't feel warmth when I saw her. Only distance. She looked up at me with a hopeful, almost desperate expression. "Mike, I'm so sorry." I nodded, not because I forgave her, but because I understood finally that forgiveness wasn't the point. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady. Sarah flinched, looking down at the table. "A year." I swallowed hard. I don't know what I was expecting. A few weeks, a few months, but a year? A whole year of lying. A whole year of pretending. A whole year of coming home to me, sleeping next to me, telling me she loved me, while being with Emma behind my back. I didn't even realize I had clenched my fists until I forced myself to breathe. "Did you ever plan on telling me?" She hesitated, and that was my answer. No, she wouldn't have told me, not unless she had to, not unless I had caught her. "Did you ever love me?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes, of course I did." "Then why?" My voice cracked, despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Sarah wiped at her face, shaking her head. "I don't know. I was confused. I was scared. I didn't mean for this to happen." "You had a whole year to stop." She had no response to that. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the divorce papers. Her eyes widened. "Mike, No, I cut her off. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to make this messy. I want this to be over. Her lower lip trembled. I never wanted to hurt you. You did. I pushed the papers across the table. You wanted this, Sarah. You wanted to be with her. Now you can be. I don't want to lose you completely. Her voice was barely a whisper. I took a deep breath, looking at the woman I had once loved more than anything. The woman I had planned to grow old with. And I realized I didn't know her anymore. You already did. I stood up. For the first time in days, I felt lighter. Not happy, not healed, but free, and that was enough.